We are now live.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual board meeting. As we continue to hold these virtual meetings, there are a few housekeeping items for us to keep in mind. We're streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, please remain on mute and I ask that you put your hand up if you'd like to speak, and we'll retain a list of speaking requests as we go on. Once you're called on to speak, you can unmute and proceed. And once you're done, please mute yourself. As it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when a vote is called. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin using the same link provided. We'll now begin the Peel Police Services Board meeting of April 23rd, 2021. We'll do a roll call. I believe everyone's here except for Councillor Martin Darris. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, we will continue with the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Chief's update. I'll now ask the Chief to provide the board with his update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Happy to provide you a very, very brief update. We know it's been a significant week with a lot of the provincial regulations that are in effect. We understand that there's been a lot of community interest into some of the regulations that have been socialized, but that are now in place. Our team is continuing to work with both municipal bylaw enforcement and public health as it pertains to the regulations of the EMCPA. We have a strong and solid dialogue with the province and understand the priorities that are really obviously accentuated in our region. And we continue to do so in a manner that is appropriate and in keeping with where public health sees the needs and demands. We are certainly coming alongside of that, particularly as you'll see in forthcoming media with the Pearson International Airport. We are in discussions with the ministry on how to assist and come alongside provincial public health as they look at inbound flights of various natures. That said, I just wanted to say that we're excited this morning to have a couple of really significant deputations and a presentation. Also one which I want to highlight as the backbone of where this region is going is really applying a collaborative multi-sector upstream opportunities. And they don't happen alone. And I do want to highlight that we're looking forward to one presentation coming with Peel CAS, just remarkable partners as it pertains to this concept. And secondly, the intimate partner violence presentation by Inspector Hewison and Deputy Milinovich also captures a real key stakeholder and stakeholders alongside of that. So with that, Chair Attia, I'll promptly pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I pass it to questions and comments from board members, I just want to congratulate Deputy Milinovich and his team for launching the Intimate Partner Violence Unit. It's something that's been a priority for the board. I think it's exciting to see this begin, and we're looking forward to hearing about it in our agenda. Thank you, Deputy Chief. To the board, are there any questions or announcements? Okay, I don't see any. So then we'll begin with our first item, which is the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, March 26, 2021. Can I have a mover to approve these minutes? Al, seconded by Mr. Chada. Thank you very much. All in favor? And so this has been carried. We'll now move to our next item. We have a deputation submitted by Mr. David Bosveld. The deputation is available online on our website with the rest of our agenda items. but just as a the the uh, the deputation is essentially requesting the establishment of an anti-Black racism advisory panel for the Peel Police Services Board. Are there any comments regarding this deputation? Mayor Crombie.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure if the deputant was going to come forward and speak, or we're just receiving the correspondence that we received. And I do have a question on how the board wants to proceed with it, whether we are interested in having our executive director, Rob, come back with a report to us on the feasibility of the ideas. Certainly there are regions that do have advisory committees to the board, and other regions that do not. And the chief has his advisory committees, the mayors do as well. But I'd be interested in a little report back on what the feasibility of such a proposal would be.
Sure. So first of all, the deputation was submitted without presentation, but it is available online with our agenda for anyone in the public who'd like to read it. Before we go to discussion around maybe what the board, comments from the board on this deputation, maybe I can pass it to the chief. There's been a lot of, just on the basis that there's been a lot of work, both related to our OHRC as well as just in the general direction of engagement with the community is a big part of what our board has been driving. And so, Chief, maybe you could talk about some of the work that's being done around engagement, particularly around anti-Black racism, and then we can take it back to the board and discuss how this can be, looked at board level. Please go ahead, Chief, if you're okay with that.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, just acknowledge the fact that, the sentiment, particularly in this deputation, and what we certainly have heard in since, the spring or summer of last year, really is that, traditional, consultative mechanisms for public institutions, inclusive of policing, right now with, people's current sentiment and awareness of issues, particularly as it relates to anti-Black racism, don't seem to suffice, right? And I think the sentiment is that, there needs to be an evolution in terms of, composition, who the voices are at the table. Are they those with, real lived experiences and not ones to check boxes off for, police organizations or, boards, et cetera. So I think we need to acknowledge that, that's a driving sentiment. People want, real contemporary, authentic representation that helps inform decision making. So that being said, I do want to comment, and thank you for providing the opportunity, is that we know that this is a need. We know we have really heard that from our community in a variety of different mechanisms. So, notwithstanding what the board decides, as a police organization, when I look at how we serve the community, right from, all the types of programming and service delivery we have, each of them requires probably thoughtful consultation at certain points to help inform how we, evolve, change, build on programming, maybe even deconstruct some and rebuild them. And we certainly have been doing this, right from, really early last year. And I want to highlight the discussions around our youth engagement, the egress of the school resource officer program, and then building new programming up is, really highlighting the fact that we recognize that. And, we've got some people on this call here that have been right on the ground floor of that, Mark Andrews and Ferris Ishmael and a lot of the team. So, the sentiment is, understood. I think what I'd like to just highlight is that, yes, there are a lot of activities that are in the formative stages and some that have begun. We are frankly not wanting to rush them, just for the same reason as I don't think we need to check boxes off. The work that the board has commissioned with the service related to perhaps the development of, well, certainly the Human Rights Committee, which is in the formative stages. We know the heart of it is we want some of that work to also speak to anti-Black racism, and notwithstanding that there are other forms of, attention that needs to happen in our community. I think, my thoughts are, should the board decide to, as they accept the deputation, take it away, I'd happily work with Executive Director Serpe to, contribute to an information report for the board. And of course, the board's prerogative to decide where to go from there.
So I just want to thank you, Chief. I just want to, you've said it, but I want to make sure, it's understood that when it comes to the OHRC, which is a big part of dealing with systemic racism, and a big part of that is, anti-Black racism. The board is one of the parties who not only, drove that with you, Chief, but is a signatory and therefore accountable to that. And so that might be, just for the public to understand, that is something that is unique to Peel Police, and that the board has a role in and that project has a significant element of engagement with the public on the outcomes of that project. So I also want to point out that although Councillor Martin Medeiros was not, had a conflict and couldn't be here today, he also has expressed feedback on this deputation. And so I just want to share that he'd also like to see the board go back and study what could be done here and to look at the recommendations of this deputation further. So are there any other comments from board members before we kind of move towards some action on this? Mr. Howell, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
I would just comment in relation to the study by the executive director, if we could also look into the definition of any disadvantaged group by the OHRC and the criminal code, that if it's reasonable for us to form a panel on any singular disadvantaged group in relation to all disadvantaged groups, and if that's a reasonable expectation. Thank you.
I'm not sure, Mayor Crombie, if you had your hand up again.
No, I would like a report to come back. I think Martin has a great idea here. I'd like to know what other boards are doing, because as I mentioned before, I know that the chief has advisory committees. I have my own advisory committees, a number of them actually, and forming a new anti-Asian hate advisory committee as well. And I'm sure the chief is considering doing something similar. So I guess the principle here is, does the board itself need our own advisory committees, and what responsibilities will come with that? We are all doing public consultations. My consultation with my Black Advisory Committee will be going on May through June. I know the chief has done them. We've participated in them as a board. So will be incumbent on us to, go out to the community on our own as well. So I think Martin's on to something here with having a report come back to advise us on what direction we can go, and then we have something to discuss and vote on following that.
So Mayor, would you like to propose a motion, or would you like me to do that?
No, yep, I'm happy to move it. Let's give Martin credit for it.
Okay, go ahead, Carl. Go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, just that.
Was that?
What we do at council is we refer back to staff for a report.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I assume we need a seconder for that. That is, or is that right? That's the motion, right? Essentially. Okay. So can I have a seconder? I'll second it then. Or I saw Al. I'll give it to Al. And then all in favor? Okay. I think it's been carried. There's a lot of people on the screen today, so I'm trying to see the board members. So thank you for your patience. Okay, so and thank you to Mr. David Bosveld for bringing that deputation forward. It was very thoughtful and certainly needed. We'll move to our first presentation which is going to be provided by Mr. Rav Baines, Chief Executive Officer of the Peel Children's Aid Society, and Ms. Daria Allen Abron, Service Director of the Peel Children's Aid Society. If you can please unmute yourselves and begin your presentation.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Chief, as well, for those introductory remarks. And I must say, it would have been nice to have seen everybody, personally, but this COVID certainly has been extremely challenging. Also, it's really nice to see so many familiar faces, Ron and Mark and the others, and Chen Ando. It's great to see you. I do want to give a shout out to Mayor Crombie. Thank you for doing that short video, thanking our volunteers. It was very, very well received yesterday evening. So thank you, Mayor, for doing that. And it's a pleasure, as I said, to be presenting to the Peel Service Board. And to be honest, as we were waiting to join your meeting, Daria and I were chatting. And this is a bit of a historic moment. I don't think Children's Aid Society has ever presented before the Peel Police Service Board. So this is a first, and we must be one of the first Children's Aid Societies to present across the province. So it's really exciting to be here. And of course, these things don't just happen by accident. We know that this is a direct result of the Chief's work in the community and his staff and people that I've already mentioned, and Dario will mention many more of his staff as well, and reaching out to us and building partnership, which is really appreciated. So these things don't happen really by accident. And really example of that, as I said, is that we're here. We're here, which is a first. And of course, secondly, is the Chief's leadership on moving forward the community safety wellbeing plan, which is really much appreciated. And of course, that plan, Chief, went to our board, and the board had no hesitation in really signing off on that plan at all. So that was really welcomed. And of course, the Safe Centre of Peel at 60 West Drive. The co-location came as a result of the Chief's vision, his commitment and his staff commitment to work in partnership with over 15 to 17 agencies in that building to serve our families. So thank you, Chief, for all of those things. And this is really welcomed new culture by us and the community. So what we thought we would do this morning is two things, really. One is really share with you a little bit of the work of our agency. I know many people may not really know some of the work that we're doing. And so Daria, so I'll do a little bit of about our agency, then Daria will take over and talk particularly about the joint projects. So Daria, the first slide. So these are our values. I really want to kind of stress that we are very much driven our values. Everything that we do is through the lens of our values. They're our compass in everything that we do, and all of the work that we do is through these values of collaboration and diversity, accountability, respect and compassion, excellence, learning and innovation in a supportive working environment, and we care. And I'll talk a little bit about these values a little bit later in my presentation. So second slide, please, Daria. And of course, our people. You can see the diversity that is within our staff. And we all know that an organization is only as strong as its people. And I must say, we have wonderful, dedicated staff who do this complex, challenging work day in and day out. And these, we just wanted to share with you some of the comments from our families. And you can see at the bottom, the ongoing Peel CAS social worker was familiar with our cultural background. Therefore, he respected the language and traditions and families. So really, we're really appreciative of the work that our staff do every day. The next slide. And then wanted to share some of our data with you. We are very data driven. Our strategies are built on having good data, analyzing that data, planning that data, so that we can make sure that we are actually serving our community in the way that we need to serve them. You can see just through these data that we have over 13,000 referrals a year. We do over 8,000 investigations, and we serve well over 10,000 families a year. And that 84% is really, we're very keen to get feedback up from our clients and our families as well. And last year we had a rating of 84%. So we're quite proud of that number. And then you can see that 99% of our work is done in the community. We are very committed to early help and prevention to keep children, youth, and families together in their community. And the reason that this data is really important for us is because over 9-10 years ago, we asked a very critical question. And that question was, yes, we have good values, but how does our data align with our values? And when we look back at over 9 to 10 years, I can say that we were over 75 to 80% a wide organization. We had over 600 kids in care and very few partnership in the community, other than the statutory partnership that we needed. And today, 62% of our staff are racialized, 65% of our middle managers are racialized, and 35% of our middle managers are Black. And out of 13,000 referrals and 8,000 investigations, we have 168 kids in care. And we have the lowest number of racialized kids in care. So that's significant amount of work that we've paid attention to over the last 10 years. But we also know there's always much more work to do. And of course, we're not naive. No organization is perfect. But one of the things that we try and do is we listen very carefully, we learn, and we improve. And continuous improvement is one of our very strong values. So I really just wanted to share that with the Police Service Board. Daria, the next slide, please. Just want to share with you the Child Welfare Immigration Center of Excellence. Chief, you mentioned the Pearson Airport. Of course, we do significant work at the airport. We pick up unaccompanied minors from all over the world who we have in care often, but we repatriate them back to their countries. And this is a significant piece of our work. And we're one of the only Children's Aid Society that actually have a specialized immigration team. So we work very closely with our multicultural communities, polycultural agencies, but CBSA, Global Affairs, IRB. We help Global Affairs bring back 2 Syrian children who were stranded in Syria. And the Child Welfare Center of Excellence is first of its kind in Canada. We are now beginning to be recognized not only nationally, but internationally, and people are actually calling us from right across Canada. And we know the complexities of working in a number of different legislation, the immigration legislation and the child welfare legislation as well. And the ministry a couple of years ago recognized the important work of the Child Welfare Immigration Center of Excellence, and in fact gave us $200,000 to continue the work. So that's really a little bit of a brief summary about our agency, the work that we do, and some of the data. I will now hand it over to Daria. Thank you, Daria.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here this morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. As Rob has been talking about, partnership and collaboration and diversity, equity, and inclusion are really integral to the work that we do as an organization. And in fact, our board governance has historically always had representation from Peel Regional Police on our board. And currently we have Todd Christie, one of your officers, as part of the Peel Children's Aid board. And we really fundamentally believe that together we work towards providing safety and support for families in our communities in a variety of ways, including raising awareness and providing information to our community and to our staff. And last year, we provided 97 community presentations focusing on raising awareness in the areas of duty to report, intimate partner violence, and infant wellness and parenting programs. And we were able to reach over 6,580 audiences through those presentations. And we've also focused on our internal training sessions that we've been able to provide to our own staff. And those have included trainings on diversity, equity, and inclusion, including anti-Black racism, information about our Sikh community and our Arabic community. And we are continuing to invest in our own education and knowledge in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to that, we have over 50 collaborations with community partners in the region of Peel, working together to support the needs of our region. And this has always been important to the work that we do at Peel Children's Aid, but particularly in the last year when we've been faced with the pandemic, where we have really seen that the needs of families and children and youth in our community have increased, and people are continuing to struggle with issues like mental health, financial hardship, job loss, issues of isolation, and occurrences of violence. And these partnerships are really important as we work together to support our community and make sure that kids are safe. We also have a number of internal cultural and identity specific committees that we have that help to support our youth and also help to support our staff. Over the last couple of years, we have also co-created culturally specific wraparound service models with our Black, South Asian, and Arabic communities. And you'll notice that there are a few of those initiatives that are on the screen right now. And one of those is the work that we are doing with our Black community. So our ACAMA wraparound model is work that we have been doing with the Black Community Action Network, Roots Community Service, and Free for All Foundation. And together we have been able to develop a wraparound service model to better support the work that we do with our Black children, families, and youth. In addition to that, we have created what we call our SOF program, meaning together in Hindi and Punjabi. And this is also a wraparound type model. It's a model built on cultural facilitation, where we work in collaboration with Indus Community Services to provide ethno-specific services to our South Asian community in Peel. And recently and similarly, we have developed a similar model with our Arabic community, and we call this our MAN initiative. And MAN also means together, and we're working with polycultural services in order to provide wraparound services to our Arabic community. And we are in the process now of developing a community service model that will focus on our Southeast and East Asian communities. We know that in isolation, our organization cannot ensure the safety, permanency, and well-being of children and families in the region of Peel, and that it is really only through the partnership with other organizations like Peel Regional Police where we are able to build families, and we're able to sustain and support them through the difficulties and the challenges that they experience. So the Child Abuse Review Team is a cross-representation of organizations in the region of Peel that come together with a combined commitment to focus on a joint responsibility for child safety. And there are a number of different organizations that are part of the Child Abuse Review Team, including police, education, the region of Peel, our youth justice partners, people from healthcare, mental health, and ethno-specific agencies. And the general purpose of this Child Abuse Review Team is to consider information related to the volume and nature of child abuse that's happening in our community, as well as to provide a forum of discussion, planning, and advocacy for child abuse related issues, and to make recommendations with respect to the development of other community service initiatives. And so I just wanted to share a couple of examples with you of the work that happens and has come out of CART. One of those examples is the Child Abuse Investigation Protocol. And it really was developed many, many years ago and continues to be revised and updated throughout the years in order to reflect the needs of our community. And this really guides the joint investigation process that we do with Peel Regional Police, specifically with the Special Victims Unit, where we focus and do a lot of our work around in the areas of physical abuse, sexual abuse, and child fatalities. And it outlines how it is we can work together. And it really has been an instrumental tool in strengthening our relationships, but most importantly, in ensuring that the service that we're providing to children and families is the best possible. And you will notice that there's a picture of what looks like a cell phone on this slide. You might not be able to see all of the words in there, but this is just a picture of an infographic that the CART committee produces every year. It's an annual report that outlines just a couple of key facts of information. For example, the top 3 reasons why we are involved with families, domestic violence, physical abuse, and issues related to caregivers who are struggling with mental health and addictions. And we use this infographic to raise awareness and share in our respective organizations the work that is happening in our community. In addition to the work that happens at the Child Abuse Review Team, we also have a number of very specific partnerships and collaborations that we engage in with Peel Regional Police that are really important to the work that we do. So I did mention the work that we do with Special Victims Unit, where we do consultations and joint investigations regarding child maltreatment. And we have really, we are really grateful for the fact that we have fostered a trusting and collaborative relationship with the Special Victims Unit. Last year, we completed 162 investigations and 312 consultations throughout the year. Chief Nish and Deputy Milanovic and Inspector Hewison have really been instrumental partners in growing the work that we are able to do together to support our community. And we're really grateful for these partnerships. We have I know that there'll be some discussion, it sounds like, later this morning around the work related to intimate partner violence, but we are very fortunate and know that the work that we do together in this area will continue to grow as you are now co-located in Brampton at the Safe Center of Peel. We have a very strong notification system with Peel Regional Police as it relates to child maltreatment. And we are also part of the newly formed situation table. And since January, we are noticing that there is a lot of intersection between the situations that are presented there and the work that we are doing at our organization. And finally, over the past year, Inspector Hewison and I and others from Peel Regional Police have been able to come together and re-envision the Peel CAS, Peel Regional Police Liaison Committee. And now this committee comes together with senior representation from both of our organizations. We have been able to identify several key opportunities that we can work together both now and into the future. And some of those opportunities include human trafficking, the work that's happening in relation to community mobilization and mental health. And in fact, we are working together with Sergeant Dawson to bring a presentation to our organization in relation to your MCERT programs and COAST. We've identified opportunities into the future around working with youth justice, data-based collection, joint training. And I think the work that we have been able to do, particularly during the pandemic around communication, has been really essential. I know that Chief Nish and Rav in the spring and probably early summer of last year, we were able to give a joint message to our community about the isolation of children and families. And in that message, really encourage people to continue to pay attention to child safety and reach out if they need help. Our communications directors are working together around issues of communication, and the work that's happening through our diversity, equity, and inclusion leads, Chima from our organization and Celia from Peel Regional Police have been working together to strengthen our efforts around how we are supporting our community. And so as an organization, we know that we are leaving a footprint on our community and with the work that we're doing each and every day. And we really believe that as we work together with Peel Regional Police and other community members, that we are really going to influence tomorrow's legacy. So I wanted to thank you again for having us here this morning. It was our pleasure to be able to present this information, and we would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. So to the board, are there any questions for our presenters? Mayor Crombie.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you both, Rab and Daria, for highlighting some of the really critical work that you do in our community that otherwise wouldn't happen. So just on behalf of the board, we thank you, and it's always a pleasure for me to support you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie.
Mr. Chatter.
Yes, same like Mayor Crombie, through you, Chair. I just want to thank Rab and Daria for the wonderful presentations. And I know Rab and we met on multiple occasions since 2015. I'm honored to be part of Children's Aid Foundation. I'm serving as their board of director, and thank you for everything you and your wonderful organization is doing, and we're always there to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want a couple of comments to say that, first of all, I want to thank Rav and Daria for their presentation today. We have a strong relationship with their senior management team, and I hope that comes through on this conversation. But it really, Lisa would be the best to say this. At the grassroots level, our team is really intertwined. And I think, you'd all recognize that, our children, our youth, our families, are, the intersecting point between everything our human services or municipalities do. And having had the privilege of working with other child welfare agencies and having line of sight to them, I can tell you that, there are none like Peel's Children's Aid Society and their programming. You can look right from their organizational values and principles. They're almost replicate to what the vision of the board was when they implemented their new strat plan. But when you get down to people, accountability, innovation, being flexible, and also serving, outside of maybe one or two communities nationally, the most diverse population, their programming has been considerate to this, years and years ago. And, you can look at the number of, I don't want to carve out one particular data set and have too much fun of a point, but the number of, children in care is not their driving number. It's such a low number given the high population. And you look at the other data points and how, significant it is from their programming. I just want to commend you because our officers and investigators step into these homes regularly for a variety of different issues. Rarely are they, sometimes criminal, but when they are, either way, we were thankful to know that there's a great progressive line of sight to it. So, when we talk about readiness of the community to support multiple silos of human services coming together, we appreciate you taking the time in a very public forum to say that. So Nick, I just want to give you 2 seconds, not to protract this too long.
I appreciate that, Chief, and through the chair, certainly think it's worthy of underscoring the importance of the relationship. Children, youth, families, they are really the heartbeat of our communities and our community safety and well-being. And I think you've done a terrific job during your presentation of highlighting how critical the relationship is between our two agencies and other agencies in protecting that. Very shortly, we're going to get into the Intimate Partner Violence Unit. And I think it's definitely, while I have you on here, worthy of a tip of the ball cap to you and your team, yourself and Daria, and of course, Vicky, for the role that you played in helping us navigate that partnership and co-location, because I'm sure Inspector Hewison would agree, without you and your team, it wouldn't have happened. And it is definitely going to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Nick.
Chief.
And thank you, Chief.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments? I'll just say, Rav and Daria, many of my colleagues here are much more aware of the work you do. This was very informative for me. I've not interacted with Children's Aid Society much before. I've heard of you. I know what you do, but this presentation, and I'm sure for the public, was very educational. And also to hear that the situation tables that you're part of we're beginning to see the fruits of that work is very encouraging. And so thank you for sharing that piece as well. With that, I'd like to, would you like to go ahead?
I was just going to really make concluding remarks. Chair, thank you so much for giving us time. I know how busy the agenda is and how much work you have, but I really do want to give also Nick and Chief and Mark and everybody. I go around the province. There are over 50 Children's Aid Societies, and I meet with all of the other executive directors and CEO, and they're often in awe of the progress that our organizations are making and our working relationship. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful meeting, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to just share our presentation with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good day.
So with that, I'll move to receive the presentation. Can I have a seconder? Mr. Chadha, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move to our next item, which is a presentation of the Intimate Partner Violence Unit and Strategy, which will be provided by Inspector Lisa Huison and Deputy Chief Nick Milinovich. Please, you can begin.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Police Services Board. Just a second while I share my screen. Well, to begin with, it's interesting that we had the Children's Aid presentation prior to this. I think what you're going to find from this presentation is there is a momentum of change. And it is a momentum of change in some areas that are absolutely critical for our community safety and well-being. And, I want to couple that with the idea and really the feeling of how proud we are of where we've arrived in launching our intimate partner violence. And in order to gain an appreciation of that, I think it's incredibly important that we begin with understanding the landscape, the perspective, and really the issue that not only the Police Services Board saw when it incorporated it into its strategic plan and the need for action here, but our police service and members, as well as our community, have also identified this as being an absolutely critical priority. And on the screen, you will see some statistics. 3 of the top 4 most frequent incidents reported to Peel Regional Police are related to family intimate partner violence. That is just short of 20,000 incidents per year, 50 a day, 2 times an hour. And in order to properly let that sit, I think it's also important to consider those are just the individual incidents. We just heard a presentation from CAS that spoke about the family unit. So imagine those incidents multiplied by the people that are affected. It really gives you some good perspective of exactly what is being faced, not only here locally in the Peel region community, but provincially and nationally as well. This is an absolute priority. So it was important for us to begin doing some analysis and looking for opportunities to improve. In looking for those opportunities for improve, we had to ask ourselves, of course, we identified key performance indicators and results and picked through some of the data and tried to figure out what was the best approach. We consulted with other social service agencies and different partners and, really asked ourselves, what are we trying to achieve? In the slide previous, what you saw was a correlation, or basically a 5-year trend, where we see approximately 40% of our homicides can be attributed to family and intimate partner violence. That is what we're trying to achieve. What we want to do is we want to save lives. We want to prevent a homicide from occurring that can be attached to intimate partner violence. And ultimately, that is our blue sky goal and what we're committed to and what we're working towards with initiatives like the ones we're going to discuss today. Prior to discussing more on some of the innovation and things that we've done in order to better protect our families, and like I said earlier, the heartbeat of our community safety and well-being plan, I think it's also important to understand how we approach this situation or how we approached it previously. And that was generally informed by adequacy standards. So adequacy standards were, here is what each service is required to provide in this area. In Peel, patrol supervisors were trained and designated as domestic violence investigators. So uniformed patrol supervisors were the ones that maintained case management and really provided a generalist response. And ultimately, with the exception of some of the more severe or more serious intimate partner violence related offenses, it was almost exclusively handled by our uniform officers. On average, a uniform officer would spend approximately 7 hours per call on an incident of intimate partner violence, which was a huge draw on their time. And what we've heard from the community is that is not the response that our community wanted. We've also heard that from our community service providers. It was generalist, it was intimidating, embarrassing at times, and was really representing a barrier to us being able to intervene and begin to protect our communities better. What I would like to do now is we've prepared a short video that I believe really does a terrific job of beginning to explain some of the change. So what I would ask you to do is keep in mind where we've come to where we are currently today, and of course some of the innovation that we have planned for the future. But another important piece to consider in how we're flexing our service model, and again, what I will say is probably one of the most critical areas for our community, is we're making sure that we incorporate and include community voice. We're making sure that the people who are attached to that unit are passionate, advocate. We are really, it's important for us that the people doing the work are bringing with them the perspectives that will help them better deliver the service to the people that need it most. So with that, I will share a short video. Just bear with me for a second.
Officers arrived on scene and located an adult female victim.
53-year-old male, the victim's husband, was taken into custody.
The suspect has been identified as a 51-year-old man who is the husband and father of the two victims.
That female has since died as a result of the injuries she sustained.
Homicide Bureau has taken carriage of the investigation.
In 1993, I ran for my life with my baby girl in my arms, leaving my home and all my belongings behind. I had enough. I spent over a year being tortured and shamed for being me. Every day when the front door opened, I didn't know if it was going to be a good day or a bad day. My partner dictated how I was going to feel. When the physical violence started, I remember believing I deserved it. Why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? I spent so much time suffering in silence at the hands of this man, being choked up against the wall while holding my baby, punched while I was nursing her. If I left, he would kill me, and I could not have my daughter grow up without my protection. I hid all this from my family and friends. I was embarrassed and ashamed. When I made the decision to leave, there was no place for me to go, no beds available in any of the women's shelters in the region. Finally, I had no choice. I had to run. At the hospital, a kind nurse put me in a room and placed a telephone in front of me. She said, "Call the police or I will." My sister pushed me to tell my story to the police, and so I did. He was arrested, and I felt so guilty. How could I do this to him? I became angry, and then I became strong. I worked hard to give my daughter the best life I could. I taught her to be strong and independent. Now, here I am, a mother of 3 and stepmom to 1. Now I'm an officer in the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, responding to domestic violence calls. Why doesn't she just leave? How many times have I heard this question? I can tell you why she doesn't leave.
As you can see from the video, when we consider where we have come from, I obviously provided a very brief description of what was required from an adequacy standard perspective. And I can tell you that was adopted by a lot of police services. The other stream that services took was a centralized investigative unit. This is not just a centralized investigative unit. This is a unit that is embedded, that is co-located. It is representative of the community, not only culturally, gender-based, but also from a survivor's perspective. This was one story, and again, I think it's definitely worth thanking the officer involved here for having the courage to come forward. But this is one story of 48 that really we hope and we know will be translated into advocacy and the gold standard of policing in this area and service response in this area to help insulate our community from what is an incredibly important concern and issue. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Inspector Hewison to explain a little bit more about the unit. Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Deputy, and good morning, everyone. So as the Deputy had mentioned, we knew we needed to do more and to be more effective in relation to improving our service delivery for how we conduct IPV investigations. So what makes the strategy different? So if we look at it through the lens of the community safety and well-being, with incident response, we now have a specialized team of investigators dedicated to intimate partner violence investigations. And in having this dedicated unit, there'll be more consistent service delivery, opportunity for overall better care and management for survivors, and an increased monitoring of high-risk offenders. Investigators will have the opportunity to build a trauma-informed response that will produce a more thorough investigation in decreasing the potential for further harm. And what this means to have a trauma-informed lens is to understand the importance of taking into consideration the physical and psychological impacts of traumatic experiences on individuals and how this impacts their memory, reactions, and behaviors. And then for us to develop an environment and approaches that are responsive to those impacts. And next, if we look at risk intervention, in relation to survivor crisis support, we are making direct referrals to the Safe Center of Peel to ensure the necessary and appropriate supports are provided at the time. And on our first day of operations on Tuesday, we had 9 direct referrals to the Safe Center. Now, if we move to prevention, we have the increased ability to identify high-risk clients through referrals and working with our community partners to ensure appropriate supports are provided. We can leverage our partnerships and build advocacy. And it's this advocacy that forms the backbone of interventions to support survivors of IPV and the work towards ending the violence in their lives. And last, for social development, We'll be working closely with our community partners to provide the wraparound support, which can be in the form of connections for short-term crisis assistance or for more intensive long-term services, depending on the needs of that individual. This will create stronger and more intimate services, reducing that silo effect of community services, bringing greater efficiencies, integration, and coordination, resulting in the continuum of support. Next slide.
Thank you, Lisa. And I will just really quickly add, off to the right-hand side, and what Lisa's walked through is community safety and the planning principles of community safety and well-being. And it's definitely worth highlighting that moving into our move to a co-located family justice model, we did an assessment of the service we were providing, and we found gaps in incident response, risk intervention, prevention, and social development. And together with our partners, have started to fill those gaps and make sure that we provide a more well-balanced program for survivors, again, with the ultimate objective of preventing intimate partner violence and homicides attributed to intimate partner violence.
So the Intimate Partner Violence Unit is aligned with the region's and PRP's priorities for addressing family violence in priority populations. In this direction that we're moving in is a critical step in achieving some meaningful change. And what makes this approach different is our service is one of the few that has aligned our service delivery for intimate partner violence with the family justice model and is congruent with our community safety and well-being plan.
And again, if we consider nationally, we are one of few large services who is following the family justice model and embedded with the variety of service providers that we are and approaching it. That in itself, from my perspective, is incredibly impressive. Now, if you overlay that with the idea that we are also aligned and congruent with our community safety plan, along with all the additional enhancements, I really believe that we are moving towards the gold standard in service delivery in this area.
So now we'll look at how the unit is going to operate. And it should be noted that the frontline uniform officers will still be the first responders to an IPV incident. And when it's determined there'll be charges, the IPV unit will take over the investigation. And as you can see from the mandate here, it includes investigations of all criminal offenses where the involved persons are or were in an intimate partner relationship. And it's important to note here the intimate partner related breach of court orders, because we have experienced and seen in the news the tragedy in this regard where these breaches have led to femicides. And in having a dedicated unit, we'll now have the ability to place more emphasis on offender management. So if we look at how the unit is structured, the unit is going to fall under the umbrella of crimes against persons. There'll be one detective sergeant who will oversee the entire unit, and there'll be 4 shifts of 2 detectives and 10 detective constables on each shift. The shifts will mirror our frontline uniform 12-hour schedule, ensuring that there's maximum coverage over 7 days a week. The dress for our investigators will be business casual, not in uniform, and operating unmarked police vehicles. And why this is important is they'll be less intimidating, especially to those individuals who have that mistrust towards law enforcement. And the interview rooms at the Safe Center are also comfortably furnished to help survivors feel more at ease as they're telling their stories. Prior to the launch of the unit, our investigators received specialized training to offer better care and support to survivors through an enhanced trauma-informed approach. And some of the training that we are able to have for our officers included anti-racism, culturally appropriate and sensitive responses, specific training on domestic violence and sexual assault investigations, victim care and management, and interviewing children. And it's also important to note that when forming this unit, there were 166 applicants for those 40 constable positions, which demonstrated a strong desire from our membership to become a part of this unit. And the unit is reflective of our diverse community with Black, racialized, and female officers, and with members of our unit having the ability to speak 14 different languages. Do you want to just go back to the benefits?
Apologies.
No problem. So back in late August, we approached the Safe Center appeal to begin our discussions on opportunities how we can co-locate. While the presence of police at Safe Center is intended to be that positive change, we understand that it may not be perceived the same by all members of our community. So together, we've worked hard towards building that foundational partnership to start breaking down these barriers. We've listened to our partners. We've listened to survivors and on how best to operate, coexist, and navigate through these times. And despite any of the differences, we all have that same common goal at the end, is to protect and support survivors and their families. Our police services will be integrated with the array of different supports that are available at the Safe Center of Peel, which include crisis and high-risk case management, system navigation, housing support, multicultural services, legal support, parenting, and child welfare, providing care for survivors at every step of their journey. And survivors of violence who choose to make the report to police can now do so conveniently and in a safe and comfortable setting without having to attend a police station. And it should be noted that offenders will only be dealt with at the police divisions, ensuring that safe environment at the center. So the overall goal of our partnership is to provide that multitude of services all under one roof, creating a continuum of care with consistent, seamless integration. And through our ongoing collaboration, together we'll provide that compassionate support to help survivors and their families and ultimately reduce the gender-based violence and femicides that are occurring in our region.
Thank you, Lisa. And to close this out, there's really two things that I would like to leave the Police Services Board with. And, the first is that we recognize this isn't the end of the story. We have built something incredibly strong, well-balanced service delivery model. And as I mentioned, something that very few other services, particularly large services, have been able to replicate. And we are going to continue to pursue enhancements until we have put an end to intimate partner violence related assaults and homicides. And really that's our goal. So, the first thing I would leave you with is this is a work in progress. We're going to continue to pursue innovation and be better there. The second thing I would like to do, of course, is thank everybody at Safe Center of Peel, along with Inspector Hewison and all the members, service providers, and everybody who really contributed to this, along with Police Service Board and the Chief for the vision. 2020 has been a difficult year, and the result of us being able to gain agreement, not only agreement, but support for being co-located with some of the social services that we are going to be co-located with, is a direct reflection of the commitment and the support from the group that I just mentioned. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief and Inspector Hewison. Board members, any questions or comments? Mr. Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I'd like to take a minute to comment on this incredible initiative and give you some perspective on where I stand on it. Firstly, I had no idea how bad it was until I got involved many years ago with Victim Services Appeal. And my office was right behind the Emil Kolb Center, so we'd walk over and have the meetings there. And so I got an education in a hurry about what was happening in our community. And so it was easy for me to get involved. But I really ramped that up, I guess, in my own mind when Darian Henderson was murdered on July the 28th last year. Darian is the granddaughter of very good friends of mine, Flo and Paul Henderson of Georgetown. And to say they raised this little girl from the time she was about 3.5 years of age, and to say they were devastated is an understatement. The next day, in fact, or not the next day, the day after that, I think 2 days after, the chief, and all kudos to you, Chief, because the chief went out very strongly, very publicly, within a day to say how unacceptable this death was, and that it was so preventable. This was not on PRP, this was on the justice system for letting this person out. But the chief and I talked many, many times about that. And I went over and visited the Hendersons a couple of weeks after, the chief talked to them personally, and then the W5 got involved. So I worked with the chief on that. I worked with the Hendersons on it. And that W5 episode is run 3 times, including last Saturday night again. It ran on that particular death and how unnecessary that was for this beautiful young lady to be taken so early in her life, and it didn't have to happen. So thank you, Nish, Chief Nish, for what you've done. You're an incredible leader. And now that goes to the next level, to the deputy chiefs. And to you, Nick, I'm going to get your autograph when I'm there next week. You've done an incredible job. This unit, I'm so proud of PRP for your initiative on this. And the press has really picked it up. I watched it on CTV, I believe Wednesday night. Deputy Chief Nick, I think it was Wednesday. It was on both Global and CTV. And what you've done in this is incredible. It's very personal for me, as I say, because it's a little out in the distance until it affects you or your friends or your family. So the initiative that's being taken by the senior team, starting with the chief, the deputy chiefs, and everybody at PRP, I can't tell you how proud I am of what you're doing. We're moving in the right direction, and this is just fantastic work. Thank you to all of you for what you've done.
Any other comments? Mayor Crombie.
So I don't know where to begin, but thank you for recognizing the need and creating the strategy to address it. We knew the rates of domestic violence and intimate partner violence were extremely high, and the odds of women being killed were often due to the hands of their intimate partner. So I'm very hopeful that what you will do will bring down these numbers. It was interesting because given the pandemic, I think we all thought rates of mental health were soaring and rates of domestic violence and mental illness were soaring, but yet the numbers both on your report and even in the hate crimes report, which is coming up following, seem to decline in 2020. And do we think there was less reporting of both of incidents of domestic abuse and violence and then the hate crimes as well? Because it struck me as an anomaly that at a time where we're, in a lockdown and everyone's at home, sometimes with intimate partners that are unstable and violent, that the rate of reporting was lower, or the incidence was lower. I wonder if you had an opinion.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie, and through the chair. From a policing perspective, absolutely, I would agree that there is, I'm sure, underreporting. There's isolation occurring. People are having to isolate with family, and there's less opportunity to escape from under that oppression and isolation to report. So inevitably, especially if we listen to our service providers, who some are beginning to see or did see an uptick in access of service, which is an interesting concept, because the other thing that is in the back of our minds is 2020 has been a difficult year for policing. Everybody here would agree that particularly with some communities, there's been issues of trust. So it's something that we're incorporating into our approach. Is that resulting in underreporting or a lack of reporting because people are more concerned about contacting police? It's entirely possible. We know it was an issue previously, so certainly it could continue to be an issue, but it's something that we're incorporating into our approach.
And I guess my last question would be with respect to the shelter system, how inadequate we all know it is. Are you able to move women or women and children, given COVID especially, into safe environments?
Another great question. We have, through some of our partnerships in speaking with service providers that are providing shelter for women at risk, they have been able to provide shelter, but they're at capacity. And the story and what we hear from our partners is that they are under-resourced and they are at capacity. And I'm sure, I don't know if Lisa had something additional she wanted to offer that.
No, actually, Deputy, you covered it off pretty well. In talking and dealing with our community partners, they are at capacity, and they require more funding to be able to keep up with the demand in our communities.
Those are my questions. Thank you. And just thank you. And I see the chief's got his hand up too.
Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Chair T and Mayor Crombie. I didn't want to stop any other questions or comments from the board members, but I just felt the need to highlight that this initiative, I think for the board's awareness to flag that is a landmark collaborative approach that goes beyond just embedding it in a space with 15 to 17 other partners. It also is the extension of a philosophy which we've said we want to do is get upstream, be thoughtful about how we change things here in Peel. This is if not, a national, model to approach, because the strategy embeds at every possible turn an off-ramp or a collaborative element to mitigate risk. And this is a demonstration in the last calendar year of how thoughtful the board and this organization have been towards orienting our service delivery to the needs of the community. This is certainly something I just want to flag to you, because it didn't manifest itself, and there's 50 people in this unit. It didn't manifest itself in a request for 50 additional people on a budget line item for this. We recognize it's that important, and we want to be thoughtful stewards of the resources we have had. We've reoriented and reallocated resources to make this happen, because it's that important to get the right services to the right people at the right time. And Mr. Bowden, you commented on failures across the totality of systems. What we will commit to here is what's within our control, is making sure we provide the best services. And this is a demonstration. So Lisa, thank you to you, your DS, the Ds, and all the team members that are started new in the new location. Nick and Lisa, thank you for your leadership. I just felt like the need to highlight that, Chair Tia.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments? Mr. Bowden.
Just one more thing through you, Mr. Chairman, a bit of an answer to you, Mayor Crombie, on what you said on the stats going down. One of the first things that we learned at Victim Services was there's the fear factor, which was preventing people from coming forward. Secondly, was trust, and who would they trust, whether it be within their own family, friends, their own community. Thirdly, was the opportunity, where they could report it if there was, how do you get to it? And then knowledge of where to go. And when we put the four of those together, it was very difficult. We knew that the numbers were way greater than what was reported. And the thing that I hate about the numbers, Deputy Chief Monovich, that you put in, those are just the numbers that you know about. It's what really concerns me is the numbers that we never know about. And we've seen that we've all been impacted by this. So though the numbers may show us going down, I don't know that they are, and I hope they are. But again, it's the four factors. And now that we're going to be so open about this, and with the unit you've established, again, I'm very proud of all of you at PRP for what you're doing. So thanks again.
Thank you, Al. Anyone else? Okay, and so I'll just add that, again, congratulations and phenomenal job. It'd be great if at some point, Deputy Chief, you can come back, after some time has passed, to kind of show us the impact the unit is having, and it'd be interesting to see kind of the progress that's being made in this unit. So with that, can I have a mover to receive the presentation? Mr. Bowden and the seconder. Mr. Howell, and all in favor? And so the presentation has been carried. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief and Inspector Harrison. We'll now move on to new business. Our next item is the 2020 Annual Hate Motivated Crime Report. Chief, would you like to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair Attia. And the board would recognize that on an annual basis, we do bring this hate crime report, but I think we would all agree it deserves a significant amount of dialogue, particularly in our community, which we know we're committed to ensuring that we respond in an appropriate way. You know, I think the details and the numbers are in the report. I do want to say I have, you know, the special, you know, Mark and I chatted. We've got Detective Sergeant Faris Ishmael, who is going to be speaking to this. And, you know, before I hand it over to him, I just want to highlight that, you know, despite, you know, seeing a downward trend in reported hate crimes, we recognize that this last particular year still in our community brings about some really unique data trends. And Faris is going to speak to the programming and our response, and maybe also shed some light as to some of the trends. But the decline also represents that we still see our Black community, an increase in the numbers of affected in our Black community. Our South Asian community, you know, statistically is seen as, you know, number 2, consistently as being affected from a race or nationality or ethnic origin. But we also saw Asian population as number 3, but as seeing as an increase. And, you know, the increase for us means, you know, 6 reported in 2019, 0 in, or sorry, 6 in 2018, 0 in 2019, 4 last year. But I do want to highlight that this is a, you know, a national trend, one which has had dialogue across a variety of municipalities, especially, you know, given the health crisis that's in the last year. The similar trends, I want to say, note, we're seeing statistically nationally post SARS, and we know, and I'm hoping Ish will speak to some of the work we've done with our advisory communities, particularly with the Asian community and our stakeholders and the programming as it relates to that. But, you know, one of the things I do want to highlight, though, when I came to Peel, I have to say Peel's response and its programming as it pertains to hate crimes is bar none seen as a national lead. It's one of the things that, you know, we all have to be proud of. It's not one which we can rest back on. And the response, the investigative ability to follow through, the programming is all part of, you know, just the fulsome nature of how this programming has been dealt with. And I do need to say that Ish, you know, I'm going to take a little left turn here. Ish is seen as across the province as a leader in it. He's helped formulate and drive some of the programming. I also want to highlight that, you know, Ish received the International Association of Chiefs of Police Civil and Human Rights Award just recently in November of 2020 for, you know, partially the work he's done in this space. So, you know, if there's an element of assurance that, you know, we've got the best line of sight and investment in it, and it doesn't, you know, he's going to be quite humble. It's not going to stop with him. Our investigative capacity and the teams around him on engagement are all some of the best. So Ish, it's just, I'd like to turn it over to you to speak to the report and then perhaps answer some questions from the board members.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good morning, everybody. I'm you know, really grateful to have an opportunity to present this report to you. I'm just going to touch on some of the salient points in the report and then open it up to questions. But before I do, please know, I mean, I'm presenting this report on the behalf of so many officers, the Equity and Inclusion Bureau, community engagement. There's so many people behind the scenes that are involved in this. Day-to-day reassurance follow-ups, things along those lines, a very victim-centric approach that we all take when dealing with these matters. So I'm simply a voice on the behalf of many. So thank you for this opportunity. With respect to the report, I'm not going to touch on some of the kind of overarching pieces. We did have 93 hate crimes reported in 2020. Versus 97 that were reported, I'm sorry, 97 and 93 in 2020 versus the 97 that were reported in 2019. So numbers are similar. It is a slight dip. And as the chief alluded to, we certainly believe that, you know, there are various contextual factors that are part of the reason why we probably seen something like this in 2020 due to the lockdown and some of the fact that, some people were, were not out and about and some of those interactions did not necessarily materialize. We're also aware of the fact that, hate motivated crimes tend to be globally, and the research is robust, and it clearly shows that it's the most underreported of all crimes. In fact, it is widely known that only about two to thirds of any of those types of crimes are reported to police, whether they're incidents or crimes or otherwise. So, I think there's always going to be this underlying undertone of making sure that we, as an organization, do everything we can to engage with the community, to work with the community, to help develop that broader awareness about the importance of reporting these matters to police. One, if we don't know, then we really can't. If we don't know, then we can't create these proactive strategies in order to deal with these various issues, as I tend to kind of bring up over and over again. And I think this is where we as a collective can work together and make sure that we communicate that. And I'm very aware that there are multiple different programs, campaigns, both within this organization and outside of it, that are focused on ensuring that we continue to compel and inform and ensure that people do pick up the phone to let us know so that they can call us. With respect to that, our reassurance protocol is still in place. It's for those of you that don't know, we as an organization have now mandated, it's part of our fabric, that any call for service related to hate crimes, incidents, or otherwise, anything from a slur all the way to an assault, immediately triggers a response here. As an organization, we immediately connect with the victims to provide that wraparound support, connect them with social service providers. We sometimes do home visits to check on the well-being of kids or other individuals that were witness to the incident, that are trying to comprehend and deal with with these matters, to ensure that the ripple effect of this and the fear that's created is mitigated and addressed, because fear and hate and bias create a climate of fear, which could manifest in various other issues that we're all aware of. Mischief is still the number one type of crime for us as an organization. That tends to be a trend between us, and we've seen that consistently along with other organizations in the province. Race, nationality is still the number one motivator, with the Black community being the most targeted in 2020, as alluded to by the chief. And again, there are various factors that we believe and global events that led to why that number is on the rise. That's consistent across the board with any of our partners in the province, and I suspect nationally as well when it comes to that data point. South Asian were number two for us, and then, as the chief alluded to, our Asian community, we did have 4 crimes reported, and that was up from 0 from the year prior. However, we do know, again, that is a byproduct of underreporting, of a lack of general awareness, and maybe some of the fear and the other considerations that are taken into at the time by the victims, which potentially, may deter them from picking up and calling the police. These are all things that we're working with the community in order to deal with. We still continue to teach and work with the Ontario Police College to develop training and or to deliver training, in fact, with relation to hate crimes, so that we can continue to build our provincial capacity in this space. And we as an organization also, along with the OACP Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee, just last year, put out a best resources guidebook that has now made its way nationally. And as a result of that, we are getting lots of feedback, and a lot of other organizations around the country that are, reaching out so that we can work with them to develop and emulate similar programs and embed them within their services. Because again, that victim-centric approach to many of these issues is really the only approach that any of us should be taking. These are very sensitive matters that we need to be able to navigate quite carefully. Aside from that, I think the rest of the data is included in the report, and I don't want to take up too much time. I'll respectfully turn it back over and open it up for any questions you may have.
Keith, did you want to add anything, or should we go to comments?
You can go to comments.
Okay. Mayor Crombie.
Well, very sadly, we've had a number of these very public incidents here in Mississauga, even though we pride ourselves on being inclusive and welcoming and all that, but it happens. It's interesting to see the rise of South Asian targeted hate crime as well. And I was just looking at the race, gender, ethnicity, and it's males of South Asian descent and females of Black community. Very interesting. But often, I think, more so religious-based than it is by ethnicity. But I'm just a mix of everything. I can't really say that. It was also on the front page of the Toronto Star this morning. They were reporting an increase of over 50% in Toronto of hate-based crimes. So it's everywhere. Unfortunately, we have to remain vigilant. On the Safe Place program, we have a number of local businesses and associate locations that are Safe Place. Are these well used? Is that a program that people are aware of? I know that City Hall is one, by the way, and Board of Trade, but I just wonder what the awareness is.
Thank you for that, Your Worship. I think when it comes to the Safe Place program, of course, because of many of the factors last year, due to the pandemic, and really our inability to be in the community and to really kind of raise that awareness and in fact, go and personally, put that stamp, that Safe Place program. We are going to and have been really focused on raising that awareness by way of whether it's social media outlets or our internal, our website and any other way that we can get that message out there. The Safe Place program is excellent in that it actually, speaks to really various businesses and organizations that, take the onus on them to educate their members, their staff about issues related to hate motivated crime and incidents. And we can certainly help in that. And then beyond that, they open up their doors to victims of hate so that they can come in and provide them that wraparound support while the police get engaged, involved, and allowed to do their due diligence. And so this is really, again, beyond that, symbolically too, it also, the more of those stickers that we can see affixed to as many businesses and the awareness that that's going to raise is going to certainly be beneficial for us as we continue to strive to kind of course, expand that program. Again, that is a program that we're very proud of. I know, Your Worship, you were very supportive of the program once we initiated it, and it's something that we're going to continue to message and get out there. And if anybody can think of other ways that we could get out there and maybe leverage some of your connections to get that message out, we'd certainly be all ears and do whatever we can to continue to build on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, with that, can I have a mover to receive this report? Mayor Crombie and a seconder. Nando Inika, thank you. All in favor? Okay, and it's been carried. We'll go to our next item. The next item is the illicit cannabis in Peel Region. Chief, would you like to speak to this report?
Sure. Thank you, Chair T. I think all I'm going to do is provide context to why the report is here and pass it on to Deputy Nick and Inspector Custance. I think we'd all agree for context, especially if the public is watching, this report speaks very specifically to illicit cannabis. And we all know that there are other impacts on our community, inclusive of, opioids, and the fentanyl problem in our community. I just want to address that those are all valuable discussion points and also worthy of future conversations with the board and from the service. I just want to give context to the fact that this board report appears as a result of a request from Regional Council, which I had the pleasure of speaking to them in November at council presentation, and appropriately so, is going to make its way to Regional Council, but speaks specifically to the request as the impact on illegal cannabis dispensaries and perhaps the spillover of that. So Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. What I plan on doing is just a very brief, high-level overview and perhaps point out a few areas that I think may be relevant and the board would be interested in. Obviously, in 2018, the federal government legalized the use of recreational cannabis. Eventually, that evolved to provincial legislation as well, and ultimately resulted in two types of dispensaries originally, legal and illegal. Obviously, legal being heavily regulated and illegal being brick and mortar shops that were without the regulations and prerequisite approvals, et cetera. Initially, we had a fairly substantial presence of brick and mortar illegal cannabis dispensaries. Our service tried to address those with prevention through education and discussion with the ownership. Unfortunately, that didn't work. In response, a heavy enforcement model was employed, and we were successful at substantially reducing the brick and mortar illegal dispensaries. That has since evolved to mobile illegal cannabis dispensaries, which often are congruent with other drug trafficking sales or other drugs being sold, in addition to cannabis marijuana. The other thing I'd like to highlight is the driving offenses. Since 2018, up until the end of 2020, we've seen an 86% increase in cannabis-related impaired driving offenses, which is obviously a concern for our service. A deep dive into some of that data and asking why the case may be is, as a service, we doubled down on the education and our capacity and really a lot of the training courses. There's generally two streams of enforcement. It starts with a standard field sobriety test, or an officer who's able to identify that somebody is believed to be operating a motor vehicle while impaired by drug. We then bring in a drug recognition expert who's required to prove that charge and ultimately confirm the observations. So we have, since the implementation of the legalization of recreational cannabis, we have done a lot to invest in those two training programs and really develop our services capacity. So we equate that increase to really our elevated ability to detect those offenses on our roadways. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the amount of resources required in order to address both legal dispensaries, whether it be brick or mortar or the mobile dispensary. Project Siphon is a really good example of an investigation that sprouted out of what was online cannabis sales, inclusive of other drugs being sold congruent or concurrent to that. Obviously, the resources that went into that were pretty substantial. North Cloud Dispensary is, or was, I should say, one of our oldest running illegal dispensaries, and it took a tremendous amount of resources. I believe 5 different search warrants were executed. When we were able to close it down, the operators very quickly opened it back up again. We had to work with provincial partners and ultimately ended up having to post pay duties. Of course, it attracted more criminal activity than our legal dispensaries did. And that would be the last point I would leave you with. When we do an assessment of the two streams, for very obvious reasons, criminal enterprise being the ones that are involved in the illegal dispensaries, we find a variety of criminal activity is accompanying those, whether or not they're mobile or brick or mortar. And also, as the chief mentioned, I have Acting Superintendent Todd Custance. If there's questions that I can answer, I'll pass it back to the board.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Mayor Crombie.
Yeah, just briefly, I was astounded at the amount of money they earn in their illegal operations in a day. That's just astounding. So, it's worth their while that they get fined and then they open up again. So we need to figure this out. It just is logical that if there's a strong correlation that if they're breaking the law and operating an illegal dispensary, then they're more likely to be breaking other laws too. And look at the percentage of stabbings and shootings and weapon possession occurrences that are happening out of the illegal dispensaries. I just wanted to make a quick comment as well about the fact that Mississauga opted out of the program. We did that for reasons of control, frankly. The province wasn't allowing us to control where these retail establishments could be located or control the concentration of them. So we were very concerned about having them near sensitive use, more than just schools, daycares, community centers, drop-in centers, group homes, etc. And then the concentration, how many could you have in one area? I will say that we have been watching the example in other jurisdictions and other cities that did opt into the program and are operating legal retail cannabis. And we will likely bring it back and have another discussion this year at some point. So those were my comments, other than, as expected, the charges for the drug impairment while driving. I guess we knew that that would happen. There was drugs and alcohol and the level of impairment with drugs. 253 charges, is that correct? And then the combination of both was 40. And operation of a motor vehicle while impaired on drugs, 253. So very scary. Thank you.
Mr. Howell.
Yes, in support of the mayor's decision, I certainly support her decision not to have the dispensaries. But further to that, those numbers, just make sure the mayor and I are also reading correctly. Alcohol and drugs 40, but over 6 times that for just drugs. That's a phenomenal number. Are we interpreting that correctly, Deputy Chief?
Through the chair, it is being interpreted correctly, but maybe slightly, for clarity, alcohol and drugs versus drugs only. It's not as though impaired by drugs has surpassed impaired by alcohol. These charges are just meant to represent the landscape as it relates to illegal cannabis. So there is obviously impaired by alcohol, I would assume would well outweigh the figures that you see here. And hopefully that clarifies.
Understood. So drugs includes marijuana, I would assume, but it's still over 6 times what it is for the number of people charged with just alcohol and drugs. So I'm assuming the number of people charged with impaired is significantly less number of people charged with drugs, impaired by drugs, and not alcohol.
Again, just for, and I apologize if I'm not understanding.
Well, I'm looking at the chart here. It says alcohol and drugs, as the mayor mentioned, 40. Impaired by just drugs, 253.
Can I interject there on behalf of the deputy? Road safety services falls under community safety and well-being, and just for clarity, the numbers that you're referring to are a combination of alcohol and drugs, or just alcohol. The impaired numbers for alcohol by itself are significantly more. Does that add clarity?
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Although it's not on our chart here. It just says the 2 different numbers: alcohol and drugs, 40, or just drugs, 253.
And the numbers for impaired by alcohol alone, without any component of drugs, is not included in this chart.
No, it just shows a total of all charges being 353, which would suggest drugs alone are well over 2/3 of that number.
I think we could probably get that data and recirculate just for a reference point to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Can I have a mover to receive the report? Mr. Howell, seconded by Chair Iannica. All in favor? Okay, and so the report's been carried. We'll go to the next item, body-worn cameras. Deputy Chief Woodwardy, would you like to give us an update on this project?
Good morning to the board and through the chair. Yes, of course, and I'll be quick and pause for any questions. So as you see before you, the body-worn camera project continues to be moving well at a rate that is seeing successes in several of the buckets here that we provided. We are on time, we are on schedule, we are on budget, and we currently are in an engagement phase, which I want to touch on in just one moment. So at the cutoff time for this report, we were approximately 44% through the project process, which means that we are about halfway through project implementation phase. And given that it's been just over 3 or 4 months, it's actually a testament to the team coming together. We are currently formulating our what's called our data review unit. And that unit is being compiled right now. And this unit will be responsible for the security, the redaction for privacy, all data that we receive. And so that is coming from internal sources being redeployed within the organization with no asks in terms of our budget or in our personnel. So we're happy to report that that will be online soon, and they will work closely both with internal partners and also external partners, including our Crown Attorney's Office. As we have mentioned before, our community engagement plan and member engagement plan are vital to success of the project. In terms of community engagement, we're pleased to report that we have over 22 different methods of communication engagement to date. What we have done to this date is collated information from each of those communications, which will include town halls, meetings, virtual meetings at this point with members of the Chiefs Council, our Anti-Systemic Racism Council, our Human Rights Council, Committee Advisory Council, media inquiries, as well as emails that we put out in terms of information updates to the community, and also inquiries from general community members who have contacted our organization. We are collating that information and we are formalizing the response. You'll be happy to know we've received over 60 pieces of feedback through these community engagements, which will continue to move forward. And we have incorporated well over 80% of that community engagement feedback, not into operations only, but also into our policy, which I'll reiterate will be available to the community on our website. Our current deployment plan remains on schedule. We have trained over 500 officers to date, and the deployment is not yet occurred in our operational decisions. As everyone knows, we have deployed at our airport decision, given the limited number or the less traffic there to be able to study the technology. And so as we roll out, we believe that that will occur in May after we appropriately receive and contribute to feedback to our community. And with that, that concludes the updates on your report today. And I'll pause for any questions or comments.
Chief, comments from the board. Mr. Howell.
I'd just like to thank the Deputy Chief for all his work he's done. It's a fantastic program, and I think it's been done in a super time element, and I think we're doing really well with it. I think the perception from the public's been excellent, and I think we're well on our way. Thank you.
Deputy Chief, I have a question. With the rollout in the airport, it's been a number of months now. What has been the experience, particularly have there been any complaints from the public through that rollout? You don't have to give specific stats, but just generally, and beyond just recording, have we already kind of moved into other elements where the recordings are used in, as part of other procedures, judicial procedures, or so like to what extent has this begun to, has the recordings begun to be used as part of other policing processes?
That's a great question, and thank you, and through the chair. The rollout of the body-worn camera at the airport, the purpose of that rollout was to test the technology, essentially, and the interaction touch points that we've had with the community. And so to answer succinctly, we are able to gain information on the technology side that will help us shape future initiatives. For example, response to persons in crisis, or to provide social services in real time through the use of live stream. And so we use that opportunity to test that portion of the technology, as well as how the technology works indoors through various modes of whether it would be Wi-Fi, LTE, to be able to understand its performance under duress. And so we've received that, and that's really helped speed the program along. The member feedback has been extremely positive. The community feedback has also been positive. In fact, We have collated some of that information that I spoke about earlier and are including it into the body-worn camera policy and procedures, not only from our members, but from the community. As for your last question about whether or not recordings have officially been started or officially been used in any type of proceeding, whether that be legal or FOI, we can confirm that we have had some requests through our partners at MAG, which are Crown Attorney's Office, and that really is to test the evidence sharing through the format that we've provided, and that is going well as well. So we have not yet tested, or sorry, been able to provide any recordings to members of the public. They have not requested that from the airport location.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Just a question to Rob. I had a hard time hearing. I caught everything he said, but I had a hard time hearing. Is it my internet or is it the Deputy Chief's?
I had a hard time hearing it as well, so I think that might have been the connection coming out of the deputies.
Okay. I think overall it was understandable to me, so we don't need to repeat that, but because I'm chairing the meeting, I wanted to make sure it was not my connection.
Hopefully, Chair.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was going to say, hopefully that's not discouraging to have the innovation and technology deputies audio the worst.
We'll leave that one. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I don't see any. And so can I have a mover to receive this update report? Mr. Bowden, a seconder. Mr. Chadha, thank you. All in favor? Okay, then it's been carried. So I think that was the last item of our agenda. And so this concludes the public portion of the Police Service Board meeting. We'll take a break and it will adjourn for 5 minutes, and then we'll move into our in-camera through our Zoom conferencing. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you all have a good weekend.